Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Getting Into Boundary Part 4. We are back after an October hiatus. Unfortunately, it's the middle of conference season, so it's kind of hard to reliably get on a live stream from a hotel room or from a conference floor. So, you may find that our availability is a little bit on and off. We might not be quite on a regular schedule the next few months, but we'll try. So, if you have not joined us for Getting Into blank, in this case Boundary, before, welcome. I don't know. We've had a couple of these series
Getting
already,
into
so
blank.
it's like getting started. They all have the same premise, but effectively, what we're going to do is learn Boundary the hard way, and the hard way is kind of debatable because sometimes we will not show the correct thing right off the bat in our live stream. We value your participation. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you've been up to, how it's going, what you've explored in Boundary. We want to hear your questions, your chaotic ideas. So please put them in the chat. But as you do, keep in mind our code of conduct. Be professional, be welcoming, and be respectful in the chat as you do. Now, if you are curious where the other episodes of the series went, you can watch the series on YouTube. We have all of the replays at hashi.co/getting into boundary. So you can review all of the previous episodes if you've missed it up to this point. We also have a code repository on Cole's GitHub because that's just where it is. I don't know. I feel like it's been a while, so now my brain is like mush. I'm Rosemary, this is Cole, and we're here today to talk about hosts and targets. But before we start in sort of the next segment of Getting Into Boundary, why don't we review what we did in the past 3 episodes? So, Cole, would you like to do a recap? I see the big...
Right. Yeah. What did we do last time?
We gotta look. Hold on.
We did workers, right?
We did workers. Yeah, it was a while.
Yeah.
Our brains are a little bit like,
Right.
So we did an intro to Boundary. We talked about what it is, what it isn't. Mm-hmm. It will help with secure remote access management. That's the one sentence that I will give you if you haven't reviewed the previous episodes. So if you have to access an endpoint somewhere, Boundary will help get you to that endpoint and securely authenticate the users that should be authenticating to it. We're talking about human users. We're not talking about like applications or anything. Wow, this camera's off. And the other thing that we did was we talked about controllers. So we talked about the general architecture of Boundary. What are controllers? Controllers are sort of the brains of the operation. They hold most of the information about where those targets are, how people are going to access them. We set one up. We used our automating script magic to do that. We set up some firewalls. We opened up some ports. We showed how to do that from scratch, pretty much. And then last time we had to record the workers twice. You may notice that there is the part 3 was redone if you were tuning in very carefully on the live streams. But part 3 is officially correct. We focused on worker-led registration, although we recommended at the end worker-led registration via PKI, as well as controller-led registration, worker registration, which allows you to do sort of at-scale automation. If you are wondering what workers are, workers help proxy requests from a user to the target. So first you authenticate to controller. Controller says this individual has the capability to go access this target. We're going to use the worker to proxy their request to the target. So 2 parts, controllers, workers.
Yep.
Anything you want to add to that, Cole?
Yeah, so controllers, brain, workers, proxies into targets, which are the ultimate end goal of us trying to get to that, which we kind of did like right at the end last time. We just sort of like threw it on the spot. We got it done. But I know we're going to review some of that again. And then I know today because today it's called hosts and targets. So that's part of it.
So, well, let's talk about today. As Cole mentioned, we kind of touched on targets at the end of workers because it's kind of hard to show the concept of workers without targets. But basically, targets are endpoints. They could be any endpoint anywhere as long as they're TCP. It could be a web page, could be a virtual machine, could be another machine somewhere else, could be a database, right? Anything that's a TCP endpoint. And we try to keep these streams short. And there are a lot of concepts involved, especially with the boundary domain model. So you might find that this is a little bit of a shorter discussion. And it seems really simplistic, but the domain model within boundary of hosts and targets is a little bit confusing at times. So let's straighten it out. I do this diagram because I got lazy. I put things on slides. I don't know. At Culkin, is this pretty good size?
This is actually what her handwriting looks like. This is not an app. She wrote it.
No, my handwriting. Let me see if I can show a sample of my handwriting. Like a little divergent. Let me see if I can find something. Like find something that I can show. Like chicken scratch right there, right? Yeah,
sure.
Chicken scratch.
That's a humble brag. Like look at my artwork.
Anyway, I was like, I realized like I was looking at the terms. I was like, even I'm confused sometimes by the terms. So let's talk about this.
Yes.
In Boundary, we're going to talk about this more in the next stream because it has to do more with identity and access management. But Boundary has this idea of scopes, right? You have an organization scope and you can have projects within the organization. In the project, you can have targets. Targets have a default port that you can access, as well as an address or what is called a host set. So in its most simplistic form, which is what we did at the end of the worker last episode, we created a target, said, here's the default port, 22. You're going to SSH into it, and here's the address of the target. Done, right? But it turns out targets can be a little bit complicated, right? Because targets might be pretty simple in some ways if you've got a web app and it's got a load balancer in front of it. You've got like one endpoint that you're going to access. But what if you have virtual machines or hosts in an environment? Some of them belong to cloud autoscaling groups. Some of them might just be grouped by tags and sort of like a common sense or standardization that you have in your environment. Some of them might just be sort of one-offs that you created and they've been around for a really long time. So you just kind of don't bother to get rid of them, right? Kind of thing. And so the idea is that in order to accommodate for sort of all of these logical groupings of virtual machines, other endpoints that you might have, you can put things in what is called a host catalog. A host catalog is a catalog of hosts. Within a host catalog, you have hosts. Wow. Like what?
I love that definition. It's like a host catalog is a catalog of hosts. Like,
it's a catalog of hosts. I mean, I could say it's a group of hosts, but like
no,
it's arbitrary. You could decide what goes into the host catalog, right? It's not like it's not like you have to be really rigid about what goes into it. It's whatever is the logical grouping. So you may say like this host catalog belongs to this AWS account, or this host catalog belongs to my dev environment kind of thing, right? All of the VMs for my dev environment for my payments app kind of thing, right? You can just decide what that logical grouping is. And you could put just regular hosts. So that's kind of that middle, like host VM1, host VM2. You could just put them in the host catalog. And the host has an IP address, of course, right? It's any IP address that's accessible by a Boundary worker. You don't have to define a target linked to a host. Instead, if you are just, doing sort of like host by host, like one-offs, right? You might just register them as targets. A default port is 22, address, VM address, done. But in our cloud environments, we have a lot of logical groupings. One of them might be tagged groups, and some of them might be autoscaling groups, right? So a good example of this is the blue or the left side, which is something called a host set. This is a set of hosts that have a common sort of logic to them. These are can be statically defined. So for example, I was doing this the other day. I had a bunch of Nomad servers, right? And I know what addresses those Nomad servers are on, partially because I want to make sure from an availability standpoint, I pin those addresses, things like that. You don't have to do that. Nomad is actually, far more elegant and is capable of doing sort of auto scaling and very dynamically. But I was doing it just because I wanted to make sure that I had the right IP addresses and I was pinning them. And because they're static, I just register them as a host set, right? The group of them as Nomad servers. That means my target can link to the host set. I don't have to pass in an explicit address. I can just say, go to the Nomad server host set. Whenever I access the target, that means it will access any random host in that host set, usually round robin. So that's one thing you might want to think about for a second, though. Like if you are planning to just access any host just for debugging in a host set, this is probably fine. But you sometimes do want to be more prescriptive about which host you're accessing. So you can do that in Boundary. It's not like you can't describe which host you want in a host set. But just to make it easier on yourself, if you're doing some like quick debugging on a Nomad cluster, for example, and you want to get some quick information, you might just say, give me any of the Nomad servers in this host set.
Yeah.
We're also going to talk about the other half, which is on the right side in the red, which is a host set that's dynamically generated. There's a concept called dynamic host catalogs in Boundary that's available for AWS and Azure today. And what it will do is discover hosts based on your tags or your filters, right? And it will discover the hosts and then add them to a host catalog. You can describe a host set that links to a certain subset of tags. So in the case of, I think, Cole, what we're doing today, you have an EKS cluster with an auto-scaling group tag, right? This says like auto-scaling EKS cluster, this thing, right? You deterministically know that those are nodes related to that EKS cluster. So you can just pass in a tag to the host set, and then it will automatically generate a host set based on that tag, right? And add it to that host catalog. So there's two ways to do it. I guess we could talk about what's better or what's worse, but maybe we should just dive into it and then talk about that later. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for just to do recap, and this is purely from just dev when I hopped in. First off, that was a great description of host sets up until that point. They've just been the host catalog and the host set and then the host and then the target, that whole thing, practically speaking, you come in and the first time you're trying to experiment with stuff, you obviously want to get an index of where are all the moving pieces? And it becomes very odd when you're going to the docs to think, well, are host catalog sets and hosts, are they required or no? It's like, well, no, not initially. If you just want to connect to a one-off, the target is all the information you need to go to that endpoint, right? However, the hosts are like sort of that easy way to group that information together that a target can also alternatively point to.
Yeah.
So that it's and kind of the other thing too is we'll see this when we look at injected and injected credentials and stuff like that. The target also starts to wind up being almost like the person in between you and the endpoint that like knows all the stuff about how to connect to one of those things. And you also are going to like pass it
not on this diagram is like credentials injection, but effectively targets hold all of that logic. So you can divide where you want to put that target. You can put it on this host set, this host set, this host set, but keep the logic the same, right?
And so that's the name itself is what confused me, the target, because when I thought target, I'm like, oh, that's where I'm going. Where it's like, oh, this is the target information about where we're headed to, right?
Yeah.
The other note I wanted to pass off, I should have said before we started, Rosemary, I did have to actually create scopes. So we will see.
We can ignore them till the next one. Folks, it's not going to stop you from creating anything. Like most of the stuff we have automated, so you'll create it. We just want to get sort of the basics, like end user workflow down before we go into the administrative.
The scopes are like 10 lines of code anyways. So
Scopes are more important, especially when you think about grant strings and role-based access control, right? And that, I think, is better served to describe scopes when we're actually talking about role-based access control, because that's really what they're for.
I also have no idea how to grab the default project and global scope. Anyhow, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Anyhow.
Here we are.
Okay, so I guess I should probably recap what's changed in the code base since the previous time. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me hop over and show my IDE and kind of walk through what we've gone through since, just as a recap. So top level here, we've been mainly working in this infrastructure folder, right? This is where we've got all the different concepts related to where we've created the controllers, where we created a lot of the IAM permissions, and then of course all the base AWS infrastructure. Last time when we were doing workers though, we threw them all into this same infrastructure project. And we actually, all we had done is we'd set up the AWS instances themselves and sort of set them up and put in a user data script to install Boundary and sort of get the basics. The only worker we'd really set up to automate end-to-end was the PKI led worker, or KMS, whatever the official term for that is, where the worker becomes part of the community with the controller by using a KMS key. We went ahead and automated that, but for the controller led and the worker led, we SSH'd into the actual workers themselves and set that all up. Now, when automating, that is not something that could be done in a singular project in a singular Terraform apply, just due to order of operations, because for the workers to contact everything, the cluster has to be live first. And so therefore you kind of get a chicken and egg. So as a result, in between now and then, those have been moved, all the worker related stuff got moved into a separate workspace. So it's just something that you're going to run and connect to the infrastructure workspace after the fact. If you've worked with Terraform before, this workflow shouldn't be unfamiliar. And Rosemary, if you have any thoughts on that, aside from saying, well, Stacks will do it, feel free to chime in.
No,
Okay.
I got nothing else to add. Sorry. It's
Yeah.
like, usually it's just what it is, right?
Yeah, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
So the workers have been moved into this boundary folder, and we've created a new workspace on HCP Terraform, which I can, of course, am not logged into anymore because I got logged out of it. Let me show it on here. I'll drag it up into my screen here just a second. So can you see this, Rosemary?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so you can see that getting into boundary config workspace maps to this boundary folder here. And so a lot of this should look the same. If you watched the last episode, we have our KMS worker here that's getting the KMS ID, and it's going through and running the script that we had worked with last time. In terms of controller-led, what's the official name for a controller-led worker?
Controller-led worker registration.
Controller-led worker registration. It's a mouthful. The way that that's been automated here is just creating a worker. This returns the activation token that then gets passed into the worker, or the controller-led worker itself. That just comes through, runs the script, and all in general just is able to authenticate. If we head over to the boundary actual workers thing that we've been working off, we can see that those are the KMS worker and the controller-led worker registration has been completed. We don't have the worker-led one though, because we did that one manual, and that's not going to be a part of the automation. The only other thing I'll say, and this is something we'll cover more in depth last time, is that we do have some scope set up, right? So these are just, like I said, it's only a handful of lines, and this is, for now, for this episode at least, they're just sort of, can I oversimplify here, Rosemary, and just say they're just kind of folders that contain our targets at the moment?
Yeah. Just, you know what? Like, we're just hand wave magic.
Yeah. So we'll come back to it. But that is all that we've got so far. And that's it.
Nice. Okay, so let's get started with the first target then. We're going to review how we created our targets the last time, which is we went and we manually created them.
Yeah.
So let's get into one of them, which has the target.
I think it's this one. Yes.
Okay. Well, we already have some targets, I guess.
Yes.
We could create a new target. Yeah. Let's create a team target.
Okay. So let me log back into to Amazon here, because of course I've been logged out since. So 1 second. And in fact, while I do this, maybe review the process of doing that while I do this. This will just take a second. Yeah.
So in order to create a target, you really need two pieces of information: the address that you want to access, and then the port that you want to access it on. There are a couple other options. We can review them when Cole pulls up the form, but there are a couple of options in terms of how many sessions you're going to allow different users to connect to it. There's a connection limit as well as a connection time. So we're going to probably start with a web target as an example. So we're just going to choose something. But the idea is that we'll proxy to a web target, and we'll be able to access some web target somewhere, showing just we can use TCP, right? And then second, we're going to do SSH. So the first one, we're probably going to just do it on port 443 or something. We'll figure out some kind of web target to access. But I think for the most part, when you do create a target manually, you'll have to just know the address you want as well as the port, and whether or not you're going to limit the number of sessions that someone can connect. I will say, as a note, if you are connecting to databases, be aware of how many actual sessions that you are opening with a given database, because oftentimes authentication will sort of lead to more than one session connection. So you might authenticate and then do a secondary connection. And the result is that you can't just limit it to just one session per connection. You have to put a limit of 2, for example. So those are some nuances to understand. But well, let's go. Yeah, fun fact. So let's go back to targets then. And cool. Got it. Okay.
So we are now logged back in. We've got a plentiful number of instances. The untargeted ones up here are just the EKS nodes, and everything else is actually named. So where would you like to start here? I don't know if it's so valid, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Let's pick. Let's go, and we are going to create a web target. How about that?
Okay, sure.
So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new target. You'll have to choose a scope, but that's up to you.
Yeah, we can just put this one in. Do you want to put it in the default one for now, and then we'll just do the
and then we're going to put a name for the target. In this one, we can call it just like a web target, or we could call it something with an API. Let me see. Actually, there's the HashiCorp Releases API. Hold on. Releases API. Let me get that information.
Yeah.
Because we could just call the Releases API. That's probably a good web target to choose. ShareCrypt.com/v1/products. Let me just make sure.
Oh, you want to make a target outside of the AWS stuff that we made?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Because we got to talk about let's do the HashiCorp Releases API. So name it HashiCorp Releases API.
Okay.
Be specific, because I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes you'll just name these things and be like, "What target is this?"
Does this allow underscores or?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
You can also do spaces. The name is just.
Oh, you can do spaces. Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, let's try it.
Why not? Break everything. Chaos.
Yeah, that'll be annoying to reference on the CLI, but I'm gonna put back underscores. I don't want to.
You know what? You mean you don't want to break it?
Actually, you know what? Fine, we'll break it. We'll see.
Great. We don't. Okay. We chaos. Okay. Okay. The target address is going to be https / api.releases.hashicorp.com.
Like so.
Yeah, like so. Okay. And it will be on 443.
Okay.
It's pretty much going to be the same. And when you do the default client port, let's explain a little bit. So what happens is that when you try to connect to a target through Boundary, Boundary is going to spin up a proxy of sorts and proxy through the Boundary worker. This proxy is going to require a port. You can decide to pin this default client port, right? So a good example of this is maybe you're proxying through to a console somewhere, right? But you don't want someone interfering with their local console deployment for some reason or another. So instead of using like 8500, you're going to use 18500 or like 18500, right, as a default client port, so that when you create that Boundary proxy, it doesn't conflict with whatever you're doing locally, kind of thing.
So wait, hold up. Let me, because you just lost me there. This is the port by which we leave, right? Our machine leaves out to the worker. Yeah, right. Correct. And that's why if I have console running locally, I would change. Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Cool.
So kind of up to you. It's like a port forward, right? Yeah. So you just choose what port forward. You could set a default. You can set a default. The maximum duration of a session in seconds. Again, you can set this, and then Boundary will shut off the connection. And then the maximum number of connections, right? So unlimited is -1. It'll be -1 by default. But again, as I mentioned before, if you set a maximum number of connections at a given point in time, just recognize that some databases, the way that the database connects, you might find that the number of connections is not just like one. So you're not just going to get one user connection. The user actually requires 2 separate connections because of the way it authenticates, and then it eventually connects. So just might need some experimentation there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we won't add an alias for this one.
Okay. So save.
Save.
Yay.
Oh.
Address does not support a port.
You could take the HTTPS out. Take the HTTPS out.
Because I guess that does have, okay.
Yeah. So you could do 443. No, so you have to take the HTTPS out of the URL because it's an address.
Oh.
Yeah, and then you have to add the 443 there. Okay. Save. There you go.
Yay.
Okay, so do you have the Boundary desktop client or you have Boundary
I just have the CLI.
Okay, let's go to the CLI and let's try to access this.
I should probably grab the target though.
The target IP.
Okay, and then Boundary. I've already authenticated, so this should be Boundary Connect, right?
Connect.
SSH.
And then it's not SSH because.
Oh, right.
So let's do help. Connect help or dash help.
Dash.
Yeah. Help. Okay. It's gonna be HTTP.
All right.
Yeah. Connect HTTP. Target.
It's a
ID. Yeah. That should be it. If not, then we'll go back to the drawing board and we'll figure it out.
Yay, 302. We got redirected.
We got a 302. So it's connected at least.
Yeah.
I
mean, it found it. I
think it's not invoking the proxy. So can you do help on the HTTP subcommand? So you'll notice that Boundary has these subcommands for targets. We didn't really talk about this before. So Boundary has these subcommands for targets. As I will quote Jeff Mitchell, who's one of the engineers for Boundary. It's syntactic sugar. It's not actually like doing anything other than making it prettier for you to connect to the most common types. So you'll see like Postgres, you'll see SSH, you'll see all of those. It's not like it's doing anything significantly special. It's all at the end of the day, under the hood, just all a TCP connection. But from a CLI view, it just kind of makes it easier to connect to it. So we have to be a little bit the HTTP options. We should specify a path because it's an API. So here's what we're going to do. If you do the same command again, and then space dash path equals.
Okay.
/v1 /products.
Oh, I see.
So that should hopefully return us a large. There you are.
Stuff
from the releases. It tells you exactly.
Can we type that to JQ?
Yeah, you can pipe it to JQ. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. So
things.
Yeah. So this is the API call to releases, right? And so the API call is coming back with all of the releases. You notice there's a lot of releases. Yeah. We have, check it out. We have
look, Alice.
Yeah, exactly. We have a releases API. So if you want to check it out, there is an API.
11. What the heck?
Spec for it. There's a lot of stuff. I'm not kidding. There's a lot of stuff under releases. Yeah, Cole's gone down the rabbit hole. He's like, I've never
what is 11
before.
Wait, Rosemary, here's an inside joke. Where's Flex? I don't see Flex on here.
Oh no.
Okay.
Oh, no.
All right.
We're not going into that. You're confusing people more, Cole.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
All right, I'll stop. Okay.
This isn't getting into HCP here. All right. So we have now connected through a web target, right? And we use the HTTP subcommand. Like I said, you can do Boundary Connect. Yeah, you can do Boundary Connect without the HTTP command. Cole, if you could do Boundary Connect, and then I think it's just like --target ID or whatever.
Really?
Yeah. I think that will just create the proxy for you.
Oh, whoops. I copied the wrong thing out of being amused. Okay.
Not amused.
And then I would still need to add path.
No. So because we're not using the HTTP subcommand, we're just using TCP. It will just open the proxy for us. So you can do Boundary Connect, blah, blah, blah. And you'll notice there's a proxy now that's come up on port 54728. Right?
Oh, cool.
So if you don't put in the syntactic sugar of HTTP or Postgres or TCP or SSH, whatever other subcommands are there, it will just create a proxy. And you can if you can open a new terminal window or something.
Okay.
We're going to connect to, if you can curl on 127, I think it's just, 127.0.0. It's a local host. And then .1, and then the port that was there, I think it was like 54 something.
54728.
Yeah. And then /v1 /products. Now, I don't know how it's going to handle the forwarding. HTTPS. So we probably need to do HTTPS in the front of that.
Okay.
There you go.
Handshake failure. Is that because I'm curling?
Yeah, it's because you're
host.
curling to localhost and so just do curl space dash insecure, whatever.
Okay. Wait, do I yeah, hold on. Dash insecure,
and then HTTPS has to still be there.
Oh, HTTPS does.
Yeah, it should still be there.
There
might be some wonkiness, I think. Basically, with the proxy, it's a little bit weird because they're basically proxying from Boundary to an HTTPS endpoint. So there are some shenanigans here with a proxy that you might need to work out. If you're using the HTTP command, a CLI command, it just sort of like runs that command once. The proxy, nevertheless, will just spin up and sort of proxy.
I mean, practically speaking, you probably will rarely do this though, anyways, right? But that is neat though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. For testing reasons, like the reason why you might decide to do this is maybe you're like you want to test, you do some integration testing with an upstream API or something, and you know you'll spin up you'll do a boundary proxy and then you'll run like against a local port. But it's more likely than not that you'll probably just run it against the direct endpoint. But anyway, so okay, so you can close that now.
So this.
Yeah. Okay. One thing that you can take a look at in the Boundary UI in HTTP, or not HTTP, we're not in HTTP. We're on our own. I have to forget. I forget. Do you look at sessions?
Sessions.
So sessions shows like what was active. So it's still, there's a session that's still canceling. You can apply a filter that's like, you know, whatever in the past, status, I think status drop down.
Get rid of active.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
status. Up on the top, status drop down next to target. Yeah. So you can say terminated as well, canceling and terminated. So you'll notice that these were all terminated against the HashiCorp Releases API. Cole was behaving as the admin user, and connecting to these targets, right? So you do see how those sessions are opened and things like that, as well as which targets they go to. Okay, so here we are. Now, let's do an SSH target.
All right. We're moving right along. Back into targets here.
Okay.
Do we want to group this under the generic scope, or do we want to go to our
generic is fine.
Okay. Cool. So new target?
Yeah, new target. So a name for identification purposes. We did do this last episode. I recommend the name of the virtual machine or the virtual machine DNS, right? It's not the name of the virtual machine, the instance ID or the DNS. Honestly, you can go whichever one you feel is most helpful for you for identification reasons. But
we have 4 just random VMs in here for us to work with, target 0 and 1. But then we also have stuff we're going to use later for the static host 0 and 1.
Yeah, just do target.
Okay, target 0. Okay.
Yeah, and so I usually copy the private IP DNS name for AWS. For Azure, it could be DNS name. For GCP, it could be like the self link, right? So there are a couple of different things that you might decide to add in. I just do it mostly because it's easy for me to identify based on the IP address, not necessarily based on instance ID and things like that. But it's up to you.
So could the target, we also just use this as the target address too? Because
if the worker has the ability to resolve the DNS name on the network, so theoretically it should be fine.
Yeah. Do you want to try it?
Yeah, let's try it.
So it could be just IP, but we'll do that. And then this is SSH, so it needs to be 22.
Yeah.
And this we can leave. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So we've created an SSH target. So now do we want to create an alias just to show that it's cool or nah?
We could do this first, then create. Well, I mean, why not? Let's do it.
We did show aliases before, so you don't.
Yeah. So we can just name it. What do you want to call it?
You can call it target 0, boundary target 0.
Wow. Wow.
I am so creative. I am very creative, okay?
I guess that's the same for the alias value. Okay.
I am very creative. Okay, so why are we talking about this? Okay, so aliases, because I don't know how many of us actually tuned in from the last episode. So last episode, we talked a little bit about aliases as well. You'll notice that when Cole connected to the releases API via the target, he had to copy this
ID.
ID? Like, yeah. I'm trying to describe the ID, but this ID is not terribly useful in describing like what you're connecting to. Mm-hmm. And so there's a way that you can set up something called an alias. And an alias is almost like sort of a string that sort of layers on top of the ID. So that way you don't have to copy the ID. Instead, you just, as long as you know the alias you want to connect to, kind of like a DNS string, a DNS string, like you can just pretty much connect through that. You don't have to use the IDs, the random IDs and things like that anymore.
It'll make way more sense when you see it. It's just like user ID versus username almost.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yep. This looks good. Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
All right. Yep. Save. Oh. Does not like me. Check constraint.
I think it can't have underscores.
Really?
I think you have to have dashes or something.
Dashes? We can't have underscores? Come on. Why we can't have nice things? Okay. Wow.
Make a note. We'll make a note.
Okay. Wow.
All right. So we have the aliases.
So let's do it the normal way first and then show alias. Okay.
Yeah. So you could just copy the target ID and then connect to it. And we're going to do SSH because SSH.
Like so? Yeah. Do it. Mm-hmm. Yep. No promises that this is going to work.
No. Also, I don't know how. I don't have the key, so you do have the key.
Oh, permission denied.
Did you pass in the key that you used to create it?
I'm pretty sure I did, but let me double check. Let me check that it's on my little chain here.
So one thing you do have to know about SSH and the way this works, the worker is effectively forwarding the request to the target. The worker must have the key that is attached to the target virtual machine. So the very important.
This has a key. So this definitely has a key.
Right. You have to pass the key locally though.
Yeah. So I have the key local as well.
Like -I to blah blah blah. Like it knows where the path is. It's set by default.
Oh yeah. It knows.
Okay.
Hold up. Something's amiss. What was the message?
Did you specify the username? Did you specify? Oh yeah, it's wrong. It's okay.
Yeah, it's saying Cole.
It's the username. Okay, so let's talk this through for a second. So you don't see this on Cole's machine, but Cole has the default config set for his SSH, right? So the SSH key is the same as the worker, right? And the same as the target. So it's all forwarded with the same key. Okay. Yeah. So it's all that chain is all forwarded with the same key. Now you could have the workers with a separate key and then inject the target key, SSH key via Boundary. That's a separate workflow entirely. We're not going to go through that today. But keep in mind that the worker must have knowledge of the SSH key that is on the target machine, right? So Cole is automatically injecting them because his config injects it. Otherwise, if you have it downloaded locally, the private key locally, you will have to pass it in order for you to forward it from worker to target. So just keep that in mind. The second thing you need to be aware of is you have to specify the username. Otherwise, the SSH connection will just use whatever your username is.
Cole.
Yeah, which is not Cole. Yes. It is
EC2 user.
EC2 user, yeah. So be sure that you use the correct username that is going to connect to the target. So because we're using Amazon Linux AMIs, it will be EC2 user. So I think it's space dash username equals EC2 dash user.
Let's see.
Let's see how much I remember. I do remember my commands. I don't always need to reference them. Okay.
All right, so we're in.
Yeah.
So that means the DNS worked as well.
Yeah.
So now we can show the alias, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So we connected, recapping, we connected by the DNS alias for the virtual machine. like I said, the worker must have knowledge of how to resolve the DNS alias if you do that. So just keep that in mind.
Right. Just for reference, she's talking about how we made the target address the DNS.
Exactly. The DNS name. Sorry, nothing alias. Alias isn't mixed. I saw alias and got mixed up. The DS name.
We should just be able to do boundary target 0, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then user.
Yeah, username.
Is this going to do it?
I don't remember. There we go. Yeah. So this is much prettier.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Much prettier. You don't have to remember the IP not the IP address. You don't have to remember the ID of the target.
This junk
from Boundary. And more importantly, if you were to do this via Bastion, you would have to SSH into the Bastion, which is one IP address to remember, and then remember the IP address of the host that you do want to target from the Bastion.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to load all the keys and make sure they're all the same, and make sure you forward them properly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, if you have Boundary, you're just going to authenticate, and then Boundary can handle the injection of the keys if you want to set that up. We'll talk about that later. But for the most part, as long as you have the correct keys in place, you SSH, and that's all you have to care about.
Practically speaking, for folks that are less familiar with like this stuff, right now I got to have the key local to still be able to do this. But we can set it up so that we can just give, oversimplifying here, Boundary the key, let Boundary handle all those stuff, and have it pass it in when needed. So we'll do that.
That's called credentials injection. Don't close this yet. Let's go back to sessions and we'll show.
Back to sessions.
Yeah, because I know we showed it before, but just on this because we were talking about targets. Again,
let's go to active.
Yeah, so you'll see there's an active session on 10.0.99.27. And if Cole cancels it, and as a security administrator, maybe he's like, I see this suspicious activity here that's not supposed to be there. You can close it. There you go.
Yay.
Okay, so now we have talked about registering targets just as one-offs, right? So if you have targets and you just want to register them as one-offs, you can do that. But what if you have a group of hosts and you don't really feel like copying and pasting a bunch of IP addresses, right? Or using Terraform and a data source and iterating through every IP address of every auto-scaling group that you have. We will talk about now static host sets. We're not going to talk about dynamic host sets yet. So we'll get to that. But what if you have a group of hosts that you know are common, right? They kind of belong together, and you know that someone's going to want to SSH into the set of them. Any one of those sets. So
pretending like these two are just common and they're the same thing. We don't care which one we go to. Just
exactly. Yeah, so let's put static hosts 0, 1, and 0 in a host set together.
Yay, host set. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So let's go to host catalog. We have to create.
So let's do you want to do this in the default scope, or should we do this?
We can do it in the default.
Okay, cool.
It's not going to break in the default, is it?
I guess we'll see.
Okay. Did you set up the host catalog plugin in default or in?
No, that's why I had to make the new scope.
Okay, put it in the new scope. We'll put it in the new scope.
So we want to do it in the new scope.
Switch.
Okay.
We'll just put it in the new scope because we want to show static and dynamic. So let's go
next to each other. Okay.
Static
so here we're in this project. Okay.
Yay. Okay, so we're gonna go to host catalogs.
Yay.
And then we're gonna create a new host catalog. Although that was automatically created. Okay, so host catalog. This one we're gonna create. It's called a static host catalog.
Static. Host catalog.
Yeah. It will have stuff.
Okay. All right.
Words are hard today. Oh man.
Right.
Words are hard today. Okay.
Save.
Yeah. Okay. So now you got host and host sets. So let's add some hosts.
Okay. Wait. So we do right. Let's just do this first because I was going to say. Should we do that first? But no.
So you can add hosts that don't belong to a host set.
Right.
Keep that in mind, right? So you could just have a catalog of a bunch of hosts, and then certain hosts, maybe they're, by type, group by type. Maybe they're, So let's just add the host first. So we'll add a host.
Okay.
Let's add a host static 0.
Static host 0.
And then we will put the IP address or DNS name in there, or whatever.
What would you prefer, the DNS name or the
IP address? I favor the IP address.
Yeah.
I also tend to name it the DNS name too, not the name of the.
So do you want me to name this the DNS name?
The DNS name. The reason being is, at least with AWS, I mean, you could do this. It depends on the platform, the CSP that you're using. But with AWS, in terms of identification, it's just a little bit easier.
Okay, so good.
Yep.
One
added. All right. So now you're going to add another host.
Go
back to host.
Just go back here. New host, and then we'll do the same flow. Number 1, DNS IP.
And keep in mind, for folks who are like looking at this and being like, it's so painstaking, why are you doing this manually? We're doing this because that's the hard way. But we would usually be doing this in Terraform.
Now we have hosts.
Okay, so let's group these two into a host set. So let's create a host set.
Question: do we so just real quick question? If we were to not group these into a host set, if we made a target to point to this, would it still be able to like treat these as a set, or would it not? No. Okay.
It would not, because it needs to. I believe targets can only access a host set, but we can try. So if you click targets.
So because my question is that kind of feels like it defeats the purpose of hosts. Like
host is kind of one of those things that you might just onboard a bunch of them into the catalog, but you may not want people accessing them, right?
Oh yeah,
so have them sort of loaded.
Yeah, that's true. So it's sort of an organizational thing.
Yeah,
because that's what I was going to ask was like, can this endpoint here, can it be both a host itself, but then also part of a host set?
Yeah, it can be a host itself and be a part of a host set, but I don't think you can link a target to a host.
Okay, so let's go see.
I mean, we could try.
Targets. So this is new.
But I think it has to connect to a host set. So
yeah. Okay. So name. I don't know. One host. Let's call it that for now. Does that work?
Yeah. Okay, and so you'll leave the target address yes,
because leaving. Yeah, because it right here is just saying host catalogs and host sets. So
exactly. So you can't really link one host to a target. You have to just explicitly pass it in.
Do you want to try and just see what happens? Okay, so these are the only things we would technically need. And then, yes, we add host sources. Yep. So we can't. You got to have. Okay. Well,
you got to have host set. Yeah. So let's go to host catalog and then let's get our host set.
Let me get rid of this just because it's bothering me there. Okay.
I mean, we could have just linked it later.
Yeah, that's true. But I called it one host.
So okay.
Okay, so host set. So when I make a host set, do you first have to make hosts to make a host set?
Yes.
So okay. All right. Okay.
I mean, I think you can technically create an empty host set as well and then add the host later. But I think if you're doing it through the UI, you have to set up the host.
Okay. So
So I guess like in the UI, you could set up this host set first and then add the host later. Yeah. So you could always do that.
Yeah. Either one, kind of doesn't matter in the UI. Yeah. So all right. So static host set. We'll just call it static host set. Yeah. Okay. So there's that.
Okay, and then hosts, and then you'll just add them. Manage.
Right.
Create or add existing host. So you could, I guess the UI does accommodate for this. Like I said, in Terraform, you create the host set and then you would add the host to the host set. And you can always change it. So
yay. Okay. Things.
There you go. So now we've got a host set and it's got those two hosts.
Okay.
So now we can set up a target to static hosts.
New targets, static hosts. And then we leave that blank. This is going to be 22 and save.
Yep.
Okay.
You could add an alias to it if you really want to, but we're not going to do that today.
Okay.
And then host sources. Make sure you connect the host set to the host sources.
So we're going to add this. And then static host set. So I could actually have two here. I could actually connect multiple sets.
Yes.
So interestingly, this isn't even about the catalog. Oh, it is a catalog. Oh, so
it is.
So
it's the host set that belongs to that catalog.
Gotcha. So a target never points to a catalog itself. It just points to sets within a catalog.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So a catalog is mainly just an organizational concept.
It is. Yes.
Okay.
So it is, and it's also catalog as a domain or as like catalog as a domain model accounts for the plugins, right? Which we'll talk about. But
right. That's right.
where
Because
the
that's what
plugins.
we've, right. Because you would think I would have, okay. Anyhow.
You can think about it this way for those who, we can omit the talk about dynamic host catalog, but you can think about it this way. Each host catalog you might map to an AWS account. So it's a host catalog for an AWS account or an Azure subscription or a Google project, right? Google Cloud project.
Not an environment? Not like
you could make, well, some people divide by environment, you know, project by environment, right?
Gotcha.
Most people don't put their dev and prod in the same account usually.
Yeah, fair.
So, you know, it's that kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Or I guess in AWS, they're all different across all the CSPs, but if you're like in AWS, maybe you're this account, US East 1, right? Something like that. But the host catalog is effectively a group of all the hosts that might belong in a specific target environment, whatever environment you might have, right? So if it's on-prem, you might say like on-prem US East. You know, this is all the hosts that belong in that. It's like, so it's a logical grouping of your choice, but effectively the host catalog just allows you to sort all of these like thousands of hosts in a way that you can create host sets and group which ones people should be accessing.
Question then. So in this scenario where I have one account that represents development, and in that one development, we have multiple regions, would you make one catalog with multiple sets for each region, or would you make multiple catalogs for each region in that one account?
I would say because of the way AWS is divided, I would create per region.
Catalog per region.
Yeah, a catalog
that
per
makes
region.
sense, because then within that region, you might have Nomad hosts and
exactly.
EKS hosts. Okay, gotcha.
And it will make it a little bit easier too, especially if you have to do worker filtering, right? Because like the target, you have to tell which workers can access these hosts. And if your workers aren't in a specific region, how are they supposed to access the target?
Yeah, that's true.
Region, right?
So then would you do the different accounts by like, were the different accounts by like project set at that point, or no?
Project set?
Scopes.
Scopes. You don't have to. You could. It depends on the level of granularity you want on your role-based access control, right? If you're like, I don't want people touching this dev instance at all, like, and it's in always in US East 1, you know, then put it in a separate project and things like that. But it sort of will depend, right?
Yeah.
As well.
That's probably a discussion for the scopes one anyway. So anyhow, so this should just work now, right?
Yeah, we attached the host sources, right?
Yes, we did. So those are all in there.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So let me copy this. Go over to here. We'll do boundary connect SSH, and then just the target. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the username. And this will just pick one of the two from one of those two hosts at random.
So we will figure out which one.
Yay.
Okay, so it's on 98.116. Yep. So you could exit, and then we could just keep connecting.
Trying. Okay.
Yeah. It will either round robin or figure out which one's available for it to connect to. So it's kind of just luck of the draw.
So it did the same one again.
Yeah, it's probably because it's easy. It's already established the connection. Technically, you could tell it which host to connect to even within a host set. So if you want to be, here we go. Yeah, if you really wanted to be prescriptive.
There we go. Different one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you really wanted to be prescriptive, you could be specific about which host by passing in a host ID. So if you exit, I think it's boundary connect SSH, and I think it's space-host-ID, something like that.
Okay, so we would add host ID and then go grab the host ID. So let's say we want to connect specifically to 1 here or 4.2. We just grab this like so, and then
I think. There we go.
That did it. Let's test the other one.
If you really, really wanted to be specific about which host you connect to because of debugging reasons, things like that, you could grab it and specify by host ID. But holistically, if you don't really care and you're just going across all of them, like any of them, just from an informational standpoint, you know, you just connect to them as a group.
Yay, nice. Okay, that works.
Okay, so let's get to the last bit. which is, what if you have an environment that has like thousands of virtual machines already, and you do not feel like running a bunch of Terraform and rewriting it to onboard all of it and create these things, right? Or you don't want to do it, 1,000 times because in the UI, just like Cole and I did, there is a much easier way to do it, and that is the dynamic host catalog plugin. I guess if you click new host catalog, we can show some of that dialogue. But in the new host catalog form, you can specify what is called a dynamic host catalog plugin. And what it will do is automatically discover the target virtual machines as well as services on AWS Azure. One thing you do have to note is you will have to tell it which provider to use, AWS or Azure. You will also, in the case of AWS, you will have to tell it which region, right? And you do have to pass in an access key. It can be rotated. It will be rotated by Boundary. You can opt for it to actually rotate it for you. So it's very convenient. But you do have to pass in an access key with, I think, describe instances, right? It has to have describe instances
specifically
policy. It has to have, in either plugin you have to have a set of credentials that has sufficient access to describe the virtual machines in the given cloud service provider account. So access key, secret access key will give you that information. Typically, the access key, secret access key, you'll notice there's not a way for you to like assume into, you could assume a role.
Well, you can't when you're doing this. You can try, it'll break. But they just last week added so you can use assume role now. So
you could go to another account if you wanted to, using a set like the same similar set of credentials. But at the end of the day, if you are doing if you're pinning to a certain account, you want your access key, secret access key pinned to that account. You won't be doing any real cross-account access with this, right? Because there's no way for you to just go to another account, right? In this specification, you can't just go and find information about another set of instances in another account somewhere. So as a result, host catalog tends to be pinned in the case of AWS to an AWS account and an AWS region. In the case of Azure, I believe if you click on Azure, it's like subscription. Subscription. There's no pinning to a specific region. So
the users are everything in IAM is global, so you should be able to use a specific user to go cross region. It's just limited to account, like you said.
Yeah, but the region is passed into the catalog, which is why you can't.
Right.
That's why. While the key is global, every catalog. Every catalog plugin must have a region specified. That's partially because of the way the AWS API works, right? API requires you
to pass. It always wants that passed in.
Yes. Okay. So anyway, just as a note, AWS plugin will rotate credentials for you. I believe Azure also rotates the credentials for you on a regular basis. So if you are concerned about the access key, secret access key getting passed in, just just consider that. Okay. You already set this up, right, Cole? Because we wanted to sort of omit some of the churn.
I feel like the UI does a good job of explaining that you're creating a new host catalog, right? Because it's very obvious. You click host catalog. We did go ahead and do this in Terraform just because, well, as you can see, we're already an hour here. But we also wanted to show if it's going to be automated, why not automate the whole thing? So this right here is a lot of the stuff you just saw, right? Plugin name maps to the type. The static versus dynamic, though, like this is, them adding this plugin. I understand it's using the plugin, but I wish we kind of would have just called this dynamic host catalog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of like plugin. But this does create a host catalog, right? And then you see some of the different options that we have that you saw in the UI here. Region, disable credential rotation, and then access key ID and access key. So it's literally just this UI and everything we would have typed in here into this right here. So that would then create the host catalog. But then Rosemary becomes the host set plugin, which I don't know that is there even a UI instance that does that? I don't know.
So if you go into the host catalog.
Right here, discard, right? Because we can go. Right. So that first resource created this top level thing.
Yeah. So host catalog.
Yes.
And then manage host sets.
Right. Here it is.
Yeah. So if you go to manage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will allow you to create it. But so the host catalog will register access for Boundary to your cloud service provider account or subscription, right? It will set the credentials for you to do it, but it does not tell Boundary which hosts to look for.
Yep.
So keep that in mind.
And a host, what this does.
Right, and that's why you have to define a host set. A host set tells Boundary, okay, within this host catalog, which uses this authentication, these credentials to authenticate to my cloud, these are the hosts that you should be looking for.
Yep.
And that is usually done by filters or by tags, right? So if you have very, very, very diligent cloud tagging, you can dynamically grab the set of hosts related to a set of tags. So in this case, Cole is grabbing his EKS node group based on the EKS cluster. And this is tagged partially by EKS. You could also get tags based on auto scaling group. You can get tags based on, I don't know, various things that you've probably also
Let me show the EKS nodes. They're the ones that are incredibly not name tagged up here, so don't judge me. But here's all the different tags, and like Rosemary said, we could have used any of these, but we're just using the cluster name.
Yeah, it's easier, and you can say like this is the group of nodes for EKS, right? This EKS cluster. And so you will have a couple other things that you need to consider, which is like preferred endpoints. We should probably talk about this. Right?
Yeah, that's just EKS specific, but
no.
Well, for EKS, it's a requirement if you're trying to get an actual node itself. But this is just mapping. This host set plugin is just mapping this user interface look here. Yeah, right. All the things you see here.
But I do want to point out preferred IPs for a couple reasons.
So real quick though, again, when you see plugin, just think dynamic. I don't know why we had to change the language between the UI and the Terraform resource
we'll eventually figure it out.
Yeah,
follow up. Yeah.
But the thing with EKS, when you're using something like the VPC CNI plugin, is you go to like IP addresses. You'll see it has a lot, but only one of them actually gets into the actual node itself. And so all that's happening here is just saying for this particular host set, the preferred endpoint we're trying to hit is the actual EKS node and not one of the IPs or the ENIs that maps to one of the containers or lets you get into one of the containers in EKS. So
this is important. Host plugins, host sets, when you define them, will automatically retrieve the VMs and retrieve all network interfaces attached.
And let's look at them. They're pretty nasty looking, right?
Yeah.
Look at this.
It will retrieve all of the IP addresses related to it. And it's kind of confusing because not all of these IP addresses are accessible from the worker, right? Cole mentioned EKS. It's not just EKS, right? If you have any virtual machine with multiple network interfaces on it and multiple IP addresses, because one might be one might be for management, one might be for data, one might be for something else entirely, and one might be a public IP. Boundary will add all of them because there's not really an awareness of which one the worker can actually connect to. So in order for the worker to know which one it's actually properly going to connect to, you do have to set the preferred endpoints. Now, if you have virtual machines that only have one IP address or really only have like one or two, and it's not really that big of a problem, then you don't have to set preferred endpoints. But if you are working in any cloud virtual machine that has multiple interfaces on it, like public IPs and things like that, just keep in mind, you might have to set preferred endpoints.
Yeah, and really keep it in mind, otherwise you're going to try to connect and be like, why isn't this doing it?
Yeah. Yes.
And so if you, what is it? There is a way when you're filtering too, to just grab whatever's considered like the primary, because they're usually, like AWS at least pretty good at sorting what's the primary. So
AWS has it sorted, but just be aware, especially if you're doing this in your on-prem environment or something, just keep in mind just which network interface you want to prioritize.
And boundary specific note here, I mean, I had trouble finding this in the docs. When you set up the preferred endpoint, you do have to both make it the CIDR block, and you also have to add the little syntax thing here, which I like. Yeah. So anyhow,
okay. The more you know.
I didn't know that. I know that's here, but I swear that was not in there when I looked.
Anyway, yeah. See, here we go. It's like just syntax. Okay. So keep that in mind. I think we could connect to it and then we wrap up because we're
okay. Yeah. So right. We didn't make a target to it though.
Oh yeah, we can make a target to it.
So we need to make a target to it, right? Mm-hmm. So we just
make a target. Same concept because it's a host set.
Nodes. And then just going to be 22, and then we leave this all blank, right?
Yeah, leave it all blank.
And we just call this EKS nodes. Just do that. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah. You forgot it. Yeah.
We'll use the.
You didn't add it. You didn't add it.
Oh, what the heck? EKS.
No, you click the add. This is when you can tell you do everything in Terraform, so you don't know how to use the UI.
Yeah. What is the UI? Okay. And then host sources, add host source, and then this, right? And then we should be good, yeah?
Yeah.
So what the heck? Did I not?
I don't know. Did you not click save?
I swear I clicked. Okay, there was just.
Okay, I don't know. We just blipped.
Okay, so now boundary connect. SSH EKS nodes, and then username EC2 user, right?
It's thinking.
It is.
It's thinking.
It might be blocked.
Do you have worker tags?
I actually think the issue is probably security group stuff right now. That would be my guess, because usually otherwise we would probably get something back.
Are your workers able to connect to it? Or your security groups are blocking it?
I bet you it's security groups.
Oh.
Let's see here. Yeah, usually when it hangs like this, it's that.
Security groups. Yeah, you got to make sure that the workers have access.
So
you can't remote access.
The remote access group from this source ID. I think I needed to pass this to the workers, right? Ooh.
Yeah. Well, the workers should be in that group, right?
Should be.
No.
Here, let me look at the Terraform. Thinking in the UI is like hurting my head. Let's.
First time anybody said that, I guess.
Yeah, that's two. That's So this is I know EKS updated something recently where when you add the group, it like does something. I had to change it in the stuff for HashiCorp too. So this might be it, because this was working last time too. But this should allow 22 from anything within our local VPC that I know the workers are in. The workers then have this security group ID. They are definitely in the same VPC. So that should allow it.
The workers have a 000 to them, and then the workers. Do the EKS nodes allow SSH from the workers?
So I actually think. Hold on. I think that this is just an EKS thing when they updated it recently. Let me just look, because I ran into the same problem last time. It was I was chasing my tail for a little bit until I figured it out. Where is it? 1 second. Group ID. What did this probably just gave the hangout, just connection closed. So, okay. All right, I am positive that this is a security group thing. So let's just change it in here. Let's start from because if we try to go through the whole Terraform process, it's going to take a bit. So both workers have exactly one security group. Yes. So this security group, what we should do is come to these nodes, any of them, and on them, we should just add a new security group inbound rule.
You have to go to the actual security group.
Yeah, let's do it on the remote access one.
No, that's the source. You have to go to the remote access. Click on next to it.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will just, where is the ad? Wait.
Click the security group.
Here we go. Edit inbound rules. Is that not the group? I mean,
that's not the group.
Let's try SSH, source, custom, and then the worker one. This should be it. If I named it anything other than that, I'd be very surprised, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah.
Save rules. Okay. And then
try it again.
Go back in here.
You should try again. Yeah. Yeah, it is a thing with the modules and things like that. Yeah, you have to just check your security groups. But there you go.
Cool. There we go. The end.
There you go.
Joy.
Joy. All right. We're going to we
did it. We used the user interface.
We used the user interface for this, right? All right. So recap. What did we do? We talked about the 3 sets of targets that you can create, or 3 sets of ways that you can connect a target to an endpoint, right? So we had create a one-off target and just put the address in it. We had create a target and connect it to a static host set. And then we had create a target and connect it to a dynamic catalog host set. Wow. My goodness.
Also
dynamic
known as a plugin.
Catalog host set. Within the 3, it goes from more manual to more automated. So if you are doing one-offs, you might decide to do a bunch of one-offs, maybe automated, up to you. Or you might decide to group a bunch of virtual machines and into a host set, static, a static grouping of those. That's a little bit more automated if you want to sort of grab and scrape that from using Terraform data sources and things like that, and add them into Boundary. And then the most dynamic, which is creating a setting up a dynamic host catalog plugin to magically retrieve a list of instances for you and put them into Boundary. And that's that. Anything I missed?
Yes. The Boundary B.
No, we're not doing Boundary B. You try it every time. We're not doing the Boundary B.
The Boundary B, yeah.
What? No, we're not doing the Boundary B.
It's already done.
We didn't do a B. Like, no. Okay. All right. So the next one. Will we have a next one? We are at KubeCon.
We are. So that's next week. Goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, next week. So we may or may not have a chance to set up for the week after that. We shall see. Stay tuned on YouTube as well as LinkedIn and check out if we do schedule a stream, pending whether or not we are capable. But the next stream will be about identity and access management, which will be a whole complex discussion because we are going to be creating chaos with grant strings, and we might lock ourselves out of Boundary by accident. So, let's see how that goes. Yeah, but we will talk about all these project scopes, all these organization scopes, how you give people access to certain things and not others. We'll talk about the identity access management in general. And that will be that. Maybe, the next ones after that, we'll see when they get scheduled. We have reInvent after that. So you can tell things.
Where we'll be talking. The two of us
we will be talking
together.
We will be talking together. And there will be Boundary and console involved.
But there will be no boundaries. Okay. Yeah.
No. Okay. All right. On that note, I'm going to end the stream. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye, everyone.